Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Jim Kavanaugh to the Reboot Chronicles. He is the CEO and co-founder of Worldwide Technology, a global technology solutions provider with over 55 locations across the globe, about 9,000 people who delivered $17 billion in revenue last year. Pretty impressive. In 1990, after being an Olympic soccer player, at the ripe old age of 28, I think, Jim rebooted his career trajectory completely. He kind of took the leap of faith and founded the company and probably maxed out his credit cards a few times along the way, like any good entrepreneur, but they built WWT from nothing into one of the largest private corporations in America and the biggest Black-owned company in the United States. It's just an amazing story. Jim, it's good to see you.
Thanks. Great to be here, Dean. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know where to start with you because, I'm from the Heartland. There's not a lot of Heartland companies that are A, still private, and B, approaching $20 billion in revenue. So it's everyone would love to hear how you did that. So we'll try to kind of get some of that in along the way. You've got a lot of good values and approaches to business. I think I found one of your quotes that said, don't look back, and I view that as such good common sense. But I'm not sure all of us do that. It's like so what. If you had to point to something that got you to where you are, what do you think it was?
Yeah, if I look at one common thread and playing off the point you just made about not looking back, I think it's actually good to look back on things that you've worked through, challenging things, things that you have learned through the process, through your journey. Because the journey never ends. And anything that you can learn and take those learnings and apply them to be smarter, better, is all goodness and just helps you. I guess the other point at a high level that I'm looking at, and I've always viewed, is that, I guess it's the piece that I look very challenging times and very challenging situations expose the character of people. So we've all heard that, and it's so true, and it really stands the test of time that you will see what people are made of in really, really challenging times, and see the grit, the determination, the work ethic, and really the values that they display in those tough times. Equally, in really, really good times, you also expose people, and sometimes even more so than in challenging times, because when you have really good times, and this is where I'm saying sometimes people tend to look back and they fixate on the articles and the awards and trophies that they've won.
Exactly.
And they're not focused on what they need to do to stay current and to continue to sharpen their skills, whether it's in sport or it's in business, or it's in life. And then I think to exacerbate that, just taking it from the grit and determination, it really can expose character and what people are made of. When people have great success, at times it goes to their head, and they start building teams around them of people that tell them what they want to hear and are stroking their ego, instead of challenging them and building a team around you of people that you trust but challenge you and push you to continue to make sure that you deliver against that high bar of call it values and behaviors. And as the world continues to turn at a very fast pace here, if you think you've got it all figured out, that's when you're going to get knocked off the hill there. So that's a bit of what I would say a common thread is, just the grit and determination, and not allowing it to go to your head.
Yeah, I love that. And it's, you're running a tech enablement company, which is, not the easiest thing to run. And you've seen And you've been through it all for over 30 years, right? We won't go back too far for those of us that aren't good business historians, but I learn a lot from business. But, 2008 downturn, I think you guys invested pretty heavily in stuff, and while everyone else was pulling back. And, COVID, a lot of people accelerated where other companies held back. And even now going into 24, a lot of people are viewing 23 as kind of a hangover year, and everyone's focused on layoffs and cutting back and tuning expenses. So I guess now you'd call it bad times, but it depends on what industry you're in. And so in the bad times, I think one of the things we were talking about is you invest in something called your Advanced Technology Center, if I had the timing right. What was the significance of that?
Well, the significance of that was really when we looked at worldwide, what we were doing in the marketplace was we were a systems integrator and a value added reseller.
Right.
And my overall thought process, along with my executive team, was we need to continue to push ourselves to be better and to think about the value and improved and expanded value that we're bringing to our customers. And so to do that, we felt we needed to create some way to bring that value to our customers. And then we started building out what we call is our Advanced Technology Center, which is really an innovation ecosystem. And that innovation ecosystem started with literally a small rack of equipment that we were using to test different, call it networking devices.
Right.
Well, that one rack of equipment has evolved into hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. It's probably $800-900 million of product that we have in these labs today that we've amassed over the last 10 years that we get from our strategic OEMs, the Ciscos of the world, the Dell EMCs, the IBMs, the
Juniper network,
go
all
on
these
and on.
guys, yeah.
And all of those products we build into our labs, and we take those individual products, build them into complex architectures that are the architectures that large global companies test and evaluate and want to see how they actually play out. So that they're looking for outcomes, not just individual products and devices. And so that was the thesis around that, was to expand our ability to help advise, consult, and speed up the decision making and the deployment of complex technologies for customers around the world, and create a software platform on top of that that allows our customers and partners and employees to get into our labs and sandboxes anytime, any place, anywhere around the world.
So that's a great reboot example, because you took what technically was like a test center, not even a demo center, and instead of turning it into a cute little demo center, you turned it into something much larger, where I'm sure all the knowing most of the CEOs that you just rattled off of your partners, they all want to be in that in that center and be a part of it. And so that was smart, and it's a good customer experience place as well, I'm sure. The what other kinds of reboots have you been through? Maybe ones that didn't go so well. You've been through a couple of downturns. Is it easier for like a VAR and a systems integrator to recover than given that a lot of the expense is variable versus the hardcore manufacturers they're making decisions right now about what to do, capacity wise, supply chain, all that stuff?
Yeah, I would say that every company has its advantages and disadvantages of whether it's intellectual property they create or it's product they create, or there's capital investments that can play to your advantage. And it can also be a detriment. It could be tech debt. It could be things that prevent you from moving with the speed that you would like to. But I guess I would frame it up one way. It's kind of interesting. Just this morning, a friend of mine who's also the CEO of Cisco, Chuck Robbins, was on CNBC, and Chuck and I have talked about this over time. And Chuck actually he voiced this on CNBC today, that the message that he's been a CEO for about 7 or 8 years now, and that every year has been a challenging year. If you look at there's you just go back the last 3 or 4 years, you've had
Right.
COVID, you've had You had the social unrest, work from home, people trying to figure out and navigate all of these things, a lot of political unrest. You have the war, in Ukraine and Russia. There's just a number of political and macroeconomic things that have happened. And the point being, and what Chuck and I have even discussed, is that there's no year that's ever without some drama. You're always, as a CEO, it's kind of the mode you need to just get used to.
Right.
And when I look at personally, go back over 30 years now, being in a position of leading a company in the CEO spot, you've got to constantly be on your toes, and you have to be pushing yourself to never be complacent with what's going on, and be trying to the best of your ability to anticipate what you see and what's going on in the market. And I think the best way to anticipate that is to be very inquisitive, to ask a lot of questions, to make sure that you're listening more than you're talking. And you're also pushing yourself to be the best that you can be. So, over the years, especially in the early years, we could have and should have gone out of business multiple times because we really didn't know what we were doing in the early years as, starting up the business. And there were so many different challenges. But the one underlying theme that I mentioned at the very beginning of our talk today was you got to have that grit and that determination and that desire and willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done and whatever it takes to grind through it. And,
it's in your.
I think that's a telltale sign of a lot of successful entrepreneurs.
Seems like it's in your DNA too. You're very humble, and most CEOs these days, especially tech CEOs, they don't admit that they were just trying to figure things out until much later. They've moved on. And to Chuck's defense, the CEO of Cisco, he was when John Chambers handed it off, it's hard to follow in John's shoes, first of all, but he kind of picked up the tougher years, I guess, back in the go-go days in the Valley when everything was just booming.
No, you're right.
Like 95, 2005 was just that's when I was out there. It was glorious. So when you look at that, have you shifted? Has the business shifted? And I guess more importantly, I usually hold this to the last question, but where's it all going? Because it seems like your category of company used to do one thing. It used to be that layer in between. And now, without stealing your thunder, it seems like it's getting much more strategic. And maybe the small guys are falling off. I don't know. But where do you see all this go? So we look back on this episode a couple years from now. What are we going to see WWT looking like?
Yeah, it's a great question.
I try.
And I think it's fascinating, too, because I do feel that, I've been very fortunate, and I try to reflect back on the past from a learning standpoint. One thing I would just, for those that are starting up businesses, early entrepreneurs or people, an observation that I've had, there's a lot of companies that, again, we were competing against 10 years ago, 15, 20, 25 years ago, that just aren't around any longer. Mm-hmm. And I would say one of the things that I have recognized and see is that you have certain level of entrepreneurs at different stages of companies, and some of them get complacent with what I would call of being a lifestyle company or a lifestyle CEO, where you have enough success, you worked really hard, and now you have enough money to have a really nice home, to go on vacations, get your boat, whatever the trinkets and toys and things that you want to do. But you just don't have that drive and desire to continue to push to the next level. And I see those companies, a lot of times you're either growing or you're starting to fall back. And I can't tell you how many I've seen over the years.
I see them all the time. They usually call me at that point, either interim CEO stuff or the fix-it guy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And at every stage, you're right. It's at every stage. It's not a magical $1 billion number or something like that.
No,
it can happen at a much smaller stage.
No, and that's where I think just, part of it is for individuals, and that's fine for people. You got to decide what makes you happy and what you want to do. But when I look at worldwide, it's something, I personally think I've grown in a number of different ways. But one of the things is that still the really the fire to continue to push, to want to continue to grow and reach new heights, not necessarily for financial or for recognition. It's just what I enjoy, and personally, I enjoy doing it with a great team. And I didn't get to where I am today by myself. I have a great team of people that have been working in the trenches with me side by side
Yeah.
for 25, 30 years. So I've been very, very fortunate. But to your point, where we're going,
Yeah.
we've got big aspirations, and we continue to push the company. To your point, Dean, that the value we bring to our customers and what Worldwide does today is significantly different than what we were doing even 5 years ago. We are a very different company. The value that we bring, the services that we provide, the things that we're providing out of our advanced technology center, the scope and reach of the company globally is just very, very different. And sometimes people that are, I would say, have been a part of it don't step back and really see, and they say, "Oh, Worldwide." I love when I have friends of mine or people that I know. They're just like, "Wow,
Yeah.
do you work anymore?" I remember one guy saying, "Do you work anymore?" They just Worldwide just kind of grows on its own. It just, and I'm like, oh.
Clueless.
I just got to laugh. Said, "Yeah, I still work."
And you've got aggressive growth goals. I mean, you used to talk about, how do you double a business in every 5 years, or 5 to 7 for most companies, or Moore's law starts to run out eventually. But it's like, my guess is you want to be a $30 billion company, annual revenue at some date in the future. I'm sure it's on a graph somewhere. That's a big nut.
It is, and to your point, we've had this mantra and kind of this high level aspirational goal, and we've actually achieved it. Really going back over the last 25 years, that every 5 years, our aspirational goal was to double our top line revenue and double our bottom line, and we really have been doing that.
That's
I look
aggressive.
back,
Wow.
over our last five, we'll be a little less than that depending on where we end up this year. But it's one, again, wiring the organization not on unrealistic goals, but challenging and aspirational goals, I think, that motivate the team. So yeah, the goal setting is part of it, but they've got to be realistic,
Yeah.
but also aspirational.
At some point, the percentage doesn't matter. I mean, if you look at the largest company in the world, Walmart, it's like the percentage of growth isn't important. It's the strategic part of growth. Like, okay, what are you going into and why? And how is it sustainable or not? And do we have the luxury to try things that might not work out? And certain companies can, certain can't. I mean, once you're over 10 billion, you have the luxury, I think, to make mistakes, and just depends on your risk taking ability. But do you see yourself being in different businesses? Altogether. So like at Kellogg, we talk a lot about, or I teach, the build, buy, borrow matrix, and how do you build your own technology company capabilities, people, how do you kind of acquire them? I don't know if you guys have acquired much. We talk about that, and then how do you actually do it from a partnering perspective, which is in your complete DNA as a value added reseller originally at your core. So you get partnering, but it's a different kind. It's a rapid growth type of a scenario. So yeah, how do you think about growth? We love to talk about growth.
It's fascinating, Dean. And again, with some of the things you're doing with your students and just looking at a broad breadth of companies, you've got good insight. Well, one thing that's unique about Worldwide is that almost 100%, 99.5% plus of our business has been all organic growth.
Right.
We've done one or two very small acquisitions that would attribute to less than $40 million of 17 plus billion.
Tiny.
Yeah, very, very, very tiny. Moving forward, acquisitions, we do have a full acquisition team in place today. that we are looking at acquisitions along with our organic growth. But a lot of what we've done, being a very different company, very services focused, much more services focused that we have internally focused on cloud, application development, digital transformation, management consulting, cyber, AI, machine learning. Those practices are all very complementary to the, call it the IT infrastructure, design and build and deploy side of what we do. So we've tried to build out and add on complementary synergistic capabilities that create a 1+1=5 kind of multiplier effect of value at Worldwide.
Yeah, we kind of call that extending your wheelhouse because it's comfortable. I mean, some of the technologies are extension. Even if you look at 6G and stuff like that, and what you be able to do on factory floors and all that, it's I think it bodes well for your category because the largest corporations in the world need someone like you to rely on. They're not going to get it from the OEMs. It's too specificity. And do you see a lot of vertical, like in Accenture, vertical areas of expertise too? Is that a
Absolutely. We, at a high level, we have three big, I would say, what profit and loss centers, P&Ls, business units. One is commercial enterprise, which are Fortune 500 companies, and I would say we've moved into the mid-tier also.
Yep.
We also have public sector business that very deep expertise in the U.S. federal government, SLED, state and local government, and then a group that focuses on traditional telco, telecommunications companies, web scalers. But within those sectors, we'll have areas that focus on financial banking, healthcare, sports and entertainment, manufacturing, with different vertical expertise in those areas. The nice thing, there's also things that I would say are transferable across those enterprises. So you might have a large bank that you're building out a global network. Well, the U.S. Air Force may have similar challenges in regards to building out their global network. And there's a lot of lessons learned. You look at some of the fast leaders and innovators around customer experience around mobile apps has been fast food. So as we've done a lot of work on building out that digital strategy and then actually building the applications for organizations. It could be a Panera, Jersey Mike's. There's a number that we have worked with and continue to work with that all of a sudden now those you look at in the healthcare industry, you're looking at the same thing, looking at how do you create that differentiated experience for the patient, fan experience. So some of those general concepts and applications are transferable, but need to be customized to those vertical industries.
Yeah, there's so much connected tissue, so many different ways to go there. We had the CEO of Boeing Global Services on now. He runs defense, and you probably know him well, but he just loves getting that cross learning and what can we learn from Matter. So Matter is an incubator we started in Chicago, right next to the 1871 incubator, one of the largest in the world. Raised a few billion for medtech companies, hardware devices that then need to operate in these 5-6G environments. And what you just said is the magic word. It's like, hey, I care about my customers' experience, and if I can add value there, that's a $30 billion company, because that's not what most people do in your sector, which is probably why you've outcompeted with them. You sound like you guys are very competitive, in a good way, in a sales way, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's
I get definitely on the delivery side that I get. But you still got to win the business. You got to win the business. These are tough deals.
You do. I mean, you got to have that fight, and you never can be comfortable losing. That should never be an experience that you enjoy.
Thank you.
But
I feel so much better. Everyone makes fun of me, but hyper competitive is, and now more than ever, right?
Oh, you look at it and being looking at things, looking at companies, looking at transformation of businesses. But, it's obvious, you go back 20, 25 years, you go back 15 years, the number of, call it, leading companies in the S&P or the Dow, those companies are transitioning so much faster. You go back 30 years, you look at companies that were there and it would sit on that. It would be the same companies for 20, 30 years. Well,
Right.
that's not the way it works. That you're seeing so many companies that really weren't around 10 years ago are now the companies that are leading the charge.
Yeah, the
And
ones that
we're
have
going to continue to see that.
and it's compressed the amount of time people are on the S&P. A lot of people they over exaggerate that data. I have the slide somewhere here. That it's all these companies went out of business. Not so much. A lot of them consolidated, but they basically have lost their influence. They've lost their mojo, if you will. So, we call it BFSs, big fat and slow companies, and the issue in the connected tissue in that Venn diagram is irrelevance, obscurity, and decline. And some of your competitors that they're not household names, but they sure are in the tech industry. They're gone. You guys ran them over. You didn't have to buy them either. That's impressive.
Yeah, and it is fascinating. You can see some companies that you looked at were the darlings of call it business schools, and everybody was watching GE and Jack Welch and what they were doing, and they're fell out of favor for a whole bunch of reasons. And the main reason
that could be a long episode just talking about that one alone.
No doubt.
And knowing some of the characters that kind of cycled through there, it's sad because I'm a huge. This is a global program, but people know me. Besides being a business builder of companies, like I'm pro-American big time, and it's sad to see that whatever we call that slippage. But you've faced the same problem. So what? I guess just a couple stories before we go out. What's been like the biggest issue you've had to deal with at the company? Maybe something that didn't go that well. You've got a long history, but usually CEOs like to talk about this when they're at the next company, they can talk about the last one. So unfortunately, you have to talk about when you're still with, because it's your baby. But sometimes reboots don't go that well, and those to me are the great lessons.
Yeah, I think and I won't go into finite detail on it, but again, at every stage of the business, you have your challenges, and again, I think it just gets to the point that I kind of looked at it with talking to different people. You're looking for people that, whether it was in sport growing up, did you enjoy practice? Now, every day practice as a soccer player and different things. I actually enjoyed practice. I did. I was, as I remember as a kid, I was very upset when practice got rained out. And I kind of look at it that you got to find people that, do you run to work or do you run from it? Do you take pride in, getting your hands dirty and digging in? And, as a CEO, you can't find yourself down in the trenches all day long. But you know what? You got to be able to take some pride at grinding it out and working with your team. And those are things that I think you can learn. Also, very early on, there was actually another individual that was a part owner of the business. It was actually my boss at the time. We came from the other company that we literally came up with the idea of Worldwide or starting a systems integrator. Well, found out the individual did not have the values and the behaviors and the things, and was doing some things that shouldn't have been doing. And so at that point, you got to have the courage also. And I fired him. And so trust me, I wouldn't say from a business school perspective, you want to think very thoroughly about trying to fire another owner and somebody who's your boss and senior, which at that point, starting back there, it can be very dicey. So the odds of that playing out was not good. But at that point, I was convicted to the point that, this is not going to work with this individual. And so
that's smart. You got to make the tough calls.
You got to be able to make those tough calls. And then I would also say that you will constantly run into challenging situations in life and in business as things continue to evolve. And I think you just have to get better of understanding that. And, it's a little bit of the Marcus Aurelius quote, what's in the way becomes the way, the obstacle's the way. It's embracing those obstacles in your way as ways to learn, to get better. And in those challenging situations, as you fight and grind through them, you learn a lot. And if you can take those learnings, and then again, as I look at it just over the years, the other one is it's easier said than done. But if you can, really look at the growth as a leader and focus on the outcomes and recognizing your team and the people around you and not fixating on who gets the credit. As the statement goes, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not focused or you don't care who gets the credit. There's more to that than I think people can believe, because ego, there's nothing wrong with ego when it's channeled the right way. But ego can be a very destructive thing, and has destroyed, I think, a lot of successful companies, people, athletes, because they've just let things go to their head. So that's where I look at, though, that is something, if you can build into your mind as a leader, to really focus on recognizing the people around you who truly work with you to create the success. And again, I look at it personally. I get more recognition for things that, it looks like I've done these things myself. And I'm like, no, I've got great people.
I just threw a bunch of recognitions at you. I know you've got a massive team behind you. And it's one of the reasons you're on the program is like, we know the kind of culture and I look at rebooting companies. I just look at three things. They're big things, but it's people, platform, and passion. And you're checking all the boxes, but you're doing it with the right approach and the right people's. Begins and ends with that. Jim, we want to really thank you for joining us today. It's been great. You've been listening to Jim Kavanaugh, who is the CEO and founder of WWT, which is Worldwide Technology in St. Louis. This is Dean DeBias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us today. We will see you soon.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you.